Hi everyone, Fenris Models here, and today I wanted to show you how I built Tamiya's fantastic P-38F Lightning in 1/48 scale. Now, because this kit has options to make either the F or the G variant, I first started the build by taking the time to annotate the instructions. I wanted to make sure that not only would I only use the parts necessary for the F variant, but I also took this opportunity to note where I'd need to do things like drill holes, cut away elements, or return later to paint. Satisfied that everything had been noted that needed noting, I could begin working on the cockpit. I trimmed each piece from the sprue using a pair of sprue snips, being careful to leave just a little bit of the gate that I could later trim down with a hobby blade, so as to avoid stressing the plastic. As each piece was freed from the sprue, I placed them down on the instructions where they go so that I could visually make sure I had no missing parts. Each piece was then picked out in their base colors, whether that was black or interior green. Once the control panel's paint dried, I needed to apply the decal for the dials. I simply soaked the decal in warm water for about half a minute, then I gently slid it into place. It did take a little bit of finagling to get all of the dials to line up with the molded detail on the part, but once I was satisfied with its placement, I used a dry cotton bud to push out any water under the decal and then soak up the excess moisture. There were also a few details that needed painting here and there in the cockpit, such as some of the various levers and handles mounted on the sidewall. Everything then got a coat of Tamiya's panel liner accent color brown. This not only accentuated the details by bringing out the shadows, but it gave everything an almost dirty tone that implied the plane had gotten some heavy usage. This effect was then built upon with a light dry brushing of metal color aluminum, 77.701. Once everything had been painted, I could assemble the pieces together to complete the cockpit. I then proceeded to use the same process to assemble the main fuselage and wings. I did need to drill some holes in the bottom piece to facilitate the 300-gallon drop tank that the F variant carried. For the most part, everything just fell into place no problem. I did not have a single fitment issue in this kit whatsoever. Even the metal balls that Tamiya provides as nose weights went in perfectly. I did make sure to paint these spots under the wings and glue the clear plastic into place. Included in the kit is a masking sheet to protect this part during the painting later, so I figured I'd go ahead and knock it out now rather than risk marring the paint job later. With the fuselage complete, it was time to move on to the booms. Each again followed the same process, going together perfectly. There were a handful of slightly fiddly parts in here, some of which felt a little excessive to be separate parts, but overall they all just fell together. I possibly could have left them out, and you'll see why in a moment, but because I didn't, I did wind up needing to trim back some of these pieces. The outer shell was then attached, and once the booms were fully assembled, they connected to the fuselage portions seamlessly. I could then affix the tail, and we're almost ready for painting. For the final assembly portion, it was time to close off the undercarriage. I've mentioned it before in some of my previous videos, but I prefer to hang most of my aircraft models. As much as I love Tamiya kits, they are notorious for not including in their 1/48 scale kits closed landing gear bays, and as such, I usually have to modify what is provided. Usually, as was the case for the nose gear, all I need to do is clip some locating pegs or hinging mechanism, something like that. It's quick and easy, and once those are out of the way, all I have to do is line up the part to the gear bay and glue it in place. The ones that get frustrating are the ones where, once any intervening tabs, pegs, and pieces are removed, there is no supporting structure to keep the bay door in the right position, such as was the case for the gear bays here on the booms. Once everything was trimmed away, including the aforementioned internal pieces that were sticking out, I took my time and carefully lined up the first door. If I can get the first door to glue in place properly and not sag, it makes the second one a breeze. If not, the second one will be a nightmare since there won't be anywhere to hold it in place. You can see on this one that I did an alright job with it. Not my best attempt, but it is far from my worst, and, you know, I'm happy enough with it. Interestingly, this kit had a few remaining cockpit parts that go in at the very end of the building portion. This included the radio unit and the seat, both important items that needed to go in before I could get the pilot in there. They were painted up, got the same panel liner and dry brushing that the other cockpit parts got, and then were installed in their places. And then it was time to paint the pilot. Using a 1:1 ratio of Game Extra Opaque Heavy Gold Brown and Model Air Insignia White, I mixed up a batch of buff colored paint. It's admittedly a bit on the yellow side, but this will be fixed when we apply some of the wash filtering. His face got a coat of model color flat flesh. His cap chocolate brown. His boots and air hose black. And his straps insignia white. The whole figure then received a filter of Tamiya panel line accent color brown. And once the figure was dry, he was glued in place. Last thing to do is close up the cockpit with the canopy pieces. You have to be careful with what glue you use for clear pieces, because things like Tamiya Extra Thin can cause it to fog up. However, if you use the glue only where you'll be painting over anyway, like I am here, you can get away with it. Once the glue was dry, I trimmed out the canopy masks and applied them to protect the clear plastic from the paint that was about to be applied. And now we can begin airbrushing. My first step is to go over the entire model with model color black, making sure to hit all of the panel lines, sharp corners, recesses, and other places where shadows naturally gather. I like to keep this a little messy to add some tonal variation to the final result. I'm not just spraying whatever wherever, but I'm also not stressing it if I'm not super straight with my lines, if it's not perfectly even, or if it's a little light or heavy-handed. I then hit the entire lower half in Vallejo Model Air Neutral Gray, 71.051. This was applied in a light coat so as to allow the pre-shading with the black to show through. You don't want to go so heavy-handed as to completely hide all of that work that you had just done. And then the same thing was done on the top side, this time with Model Air USAF Olive Drab 71.016. Once that had all dried, it was time for detail painting. This included picking out the gun barrels in Mecha Color Gunmetal 69.058, and the turbochargers in a mix of gunmetal and Citadel Layer Sycorax Bronze. I'm not sure what the exact ratio was here, I just sort of kept mixing in a little of each until I got a color I was really happy with. The detail paint was allowed to dry, and then the entire model received a coat of Tester's Extreme Lacquer Wet Look Clear to prep it for decals. Each decal was soaked in warm water and then slid into place on the model. A cotton bud was then rolled over the decal to press out any water or air underneath, which was then wicked up by the cotton bud. Larger decals, like the roundels, got a coat of microsol to soften them and allow them to sink into the details. Once set, a sharp hobby blade was used to score any panel lines that might be under any decals, such as here on the upper wing roundel. Tamiya panel line accent color black was then used along the panel lines. The gloss varnish coupled with the liquid's capillary action pulled the liner along each line, deepening the shadows and making the panels really pop. Cleanup was achieved with a cotton bud damp but not wet with enamel thinner. I wiped away each blot in the direction of airflow and gravity so that any residue left behind could be easily disguised as weathering. The same was done to the turbochargers using brown instead of black. The final thing to do was to remove the masking on the canopy, and we can call this one done. And there we go, Tamiya's P38F Lightning in 1/48 scale. I'm extremely happy with how this one turned out. Thank you everyone for being patient with me. I know it's taking me a bit to get to this video, but I hope that it was well worth the wait. Make sure to let me know in the comments below what you thought of it and what you'd like to see me do better next time. I haven't decided yet which kit I will be doing next, but there is currently a poll up on my YouTube page if you want to have some input into the matter. Otherwise, who knows, it might just wind up being another dinosaur diorama or maybe a 300th Corsair. Who's to say? Thank you to my gift set tier patron Calibear. And thank you for watching. If you're enjoying my content, please be sure to like and subscribe and all that YouTube stuff. It truly does help the channel to grow. And if you really like my content, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Everything earned there will be used to improve this channel and make sure I am fully stocked with paints, glue, and everything else necessary to keep bringing you the videos you enjoy. Still wanting to watch more? How about checking out this video here? Otherwise, stay safe and keep modeling.